Okay, we are recording. All right. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. We are here today to talk about infrastructure assessment, a phrase that we probably don't use a lot in our everyday education work, but we think of this as having a look at your system, all the things, all the different moving parts that go into making your system work. Also, all of the moving parts that we can improve to help us create the experience, the kind of positive experience that we want for students. So we're going to jump right in here to our introduction. We are the Equity, Disproportionality, and Design Project. We've done this introduction before. Most of you know us. I'm Ryan, and I'm here with my teammates, Adrian, Olivia, and Aaron. And we're also here with our collaborators from the California Department of Education. That's FMTA Unit 2 and also FMTA Unit 3. Most of you have been to our workshops, and so you know we like to start with a fun question. And we're going to do the same here. We've only got one this time, but it's a good one. So get ready to enter your fun answer to this fun question in the chat. Give me a thumbs up if you are ready for the question. Okay, see a lot of thumbs. Okay, now the fun question, Infrastructure Assessment Edition, is if you were a potato, how would you like to be cooked? Enter your response in the chat. It doesn't seem like when this was is so great. Usually people have to type. I almost feel like people have answers ready because the responses come so fast. Christine says, ouch, I don't really want to be boiled or fried, so I guess baked would be my choice. Another one, Anita says baked. Aaron says curly fries. That's all? Are people just deep in thought? I thought for sure like this was gonna seasoning curly fries with garlic. Yeah, anytime I see truffle fries on a menu or garlic fries on a menu, it doesn't matter what the heck diet I'm on, those are getting ordered. Look, I'll give it a couple more seconds. I gotta say, kind of surprised this isn't stoking
we had a lot of mashed potatoes this morning.
Yeah, we did. Oh, here they come. Scalloped. There's a good one. Oh, that's from Adrian.
Chives and butter.
Chives and butter. There's a classic. Any spoken like a true potato lover. Yes. Hey guys, what do you call it if you want to be like a potato chip? Like, what is that? The method of preparation for that? Okay, you don't need to put the answer to that in the chat. Just think on it. Twice baked. There's a good one. Yep. Bacon, cheese, butter, and chives. Okay. As per the usual routine, please keep those coming. You might be struck with inspiration later, and don't be shy. Just put it in the chat. Okay. So let's go on to our community agreements. We've talked about these before. I'll review them again, just because it makes sense, I think, to go through these. Take care of your personal needs, whatever you need to help you feel engaged. If you have to get up and stretch or turn your video off or do anything like that, please just do it. Assume the best intentions of other participants. Everybody's trying really hard here to do some very hard work. That's something that we all have in common. And so we're all coming from a good place. Let's trust that. The third, ask what you need to know to understand and contribute. Help us understand how to help you. The fourth is we encourage you to have your camera on. So those have been the best experiences so far, we think, but we also know it's not for everybody. So if you need to have your camera off, then it is not required, but we hope that you leave it on. Okay, participate by going off mute or using the chat. Most of our participation is going to be, I was waiting for au gratin. Thank you, Diana. I was waiting. I knew somebody had to put that one in there. If you are participating, do so in the chat. That's mostly the way we're going to do it, but every so often we might prompt you to go off mute and participate that way. And so, the more participation, usually the better. And so please do that. Okay, this is a collaboration with the California Department of Education, and thus we have some common values that we collaborate around. The one that we've been saying at every workshop is the big picture one. How do we keep students at the center of our technical assistance work? And the one that is specific to infrastructure assessment. What we are talking about today is how might we reframe technical assistance as a means to grow the kind of system we want for our students. So how do we talk about maintaining our systems, improving them, and being strategic in the way that we think about them so that we build the type of school experience that we want for kids. Y'all, can you believe we're at the end of Gather and Inquire? I think it just feels like yesterday that we just started. Maybe because that's not too far from the truth. We've been trying to do a lot in this short period of time. We've been through the onboarding training, data drill down, parent input, policies and procedures. We did educational benefit, and now we're here at the end of this stage, infrastructure assessment. No worries if you haven't done all of these. The videos are available, and there are also some makeup sessions coming. We'll talk more about that towards the end of the session. Okay, so what are we going to learn together today? 3 things. The first is we are going to show you how to identify the basic components of every special education infrastructure. The second is we're going to show you a tool called the Basic Components tool, and that will help you determine the status of all of the components of your special education system. And then finally, we are going to show you how to reflect on your results so that you can identify 2 things. What is a project that can be a quick win for you? What's an infrastructure related project can be a quick win for you? And then second, what is a bigger project, more substantial project that you can also take on? In a moment, Olivia is going to teach you about all the parts of the infrastructure assessment, but as in all good lessons, we must first frame the problem. And the problem is this. When we ask ourselves what part of our system we should focus on, we have more options than we have time to work on. In the words of productivity guru David Allen, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And so we view this choice as one of those game shows where there are 3 doors and you've got to pick one. Behind door number 1, there might be a car, which you'd be really happy about. But on the other hand, behind door number 1 might also be a goat or something else. If you have to pick one anyway. That's the way the game works. And whatever it is behind there, you just have to go with it. So which one will you improve? Is it going to be staffing, collaboration, data systems? Those are your doors. Pick wisely because there's no turning back. But what if you had a mental model that helped you pick more strategically? Well, if we had a model like that, we could see our system not like a 1970s game show, but as something else, like a salsa garden. In a salsa garden, you've got all of these vegetables. They all live in the garden, and some need more care than others. But it's more like balancing your attention across all of them than it is about picking one and ignoring the rest. So if you had a mental model that acted as a checklist for all parts of your school system, well, then you can think of it just like that. So take a moment to reflect. How do you see your system right this minute? Do you feel like you can only pick one thing to improve and it's an all or nothing proposition? Or do you see improvement as a continuous effort where you're floating back and forth between focusing on one thing and reassessing the whole system? So today we're going to teach you how to use a tool that will empower you to assess your whole system so you can feel good about what you choose to focus on at any given moment. Okay, before I turn it over to Olivia, I want to talk about being overwhelmed, a feeling that we all get, particularly when it comes to technical assistance. We all know that because we've been where you are. And so we get that this process, as important as it is, can feel overwhelming. We have a few messages, hopefully I'll make you feel better about that. The first is that you're going to see a lot of things today. You'll need to be deliberate in your planning. If you feel overwhelmed at any point, here are 2 things to reflect on. Number 1, today is about learning the process, not learning to do everything, but learning the process. So you have permission from us to just relax and learn the process. Second, remind yourself that at the end, you're going to reflect on 2 components. One that is a quick win, all right, defined here by this preview of the matrix. Quick win is a high impact, low effort project. You're also going to identify a major project, which again, here on the matrix is a high impact, high effort project. We are going to stay away from fill-ins and thankless tasks, which are low impact. All right. So we're not trying to do everything. We're trying to be strategic. Last thing, we made something for you. It is an organizer. And we're going to give this to you at the end. So if you're feeling like you need to get organized, you just need all the dates to line up and you need a checklist of all the things that you need to do to complete this process, well, we have you covered. We will have this ready for you. We're going to send this to everybody, but at the end, we're going to give the link directly to you so you could have this today and begin using it. Okay, thumbs up if you're ready to jump into the content. Awesome. Okay, here we go. I'm going to give it over to you, Olivia. Floor is yours.
Hey, thank you, Ryan. So today we're going to review a resource document developed. Oh, the host has spotlighted you. I saw a message on my screen, sorry. Today we're going to review a resource document developed by the California Department of Education, the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence, and West Ed. It's in your participant folder. The resource is titled Serving Students with Disabilities, a resource for assessing the basic components of your special education infrastructure. As we move forward today, we're going to be referring to it as the basic components tool. Okay, so this resource was developed to guide LEAs as they participate in the differentiated assistance process, as well as the technical assistance process. So to determine if this resource is beneficial for you, let's consider a few of the situations that, that we're going to talk about right now. One, has your local educational agency been identified by the state as needing to improve outcomes for students with disabilities? For most of us, right? Yes, the answer is yes. We've been identified as having some level of disproportionality in our LEA, and that's why we've been required to be here, even though I understand today's session is optional. Are you a new leader who is trying to understand whether your special education system has a solid infrastructure? I remember being a new leader, and during our coaching sessions, we have met many capable individuals who are taking over school districts, LEAs, as SPED directors, and this would be a good tool, once again, for them to use to be able to take measure of their infrastructure. And then lastly, do you think the system needs improvement? And are you unsure where to start? So for those of you who have been at your LEAs and districts for a long time, you can utilize this tool basically to just analyze the complex moving parts of your special education infrastructures. So what are the basic components? They are listed here. Collaboration and communication, staffing, policy and procedures, data systems, resource management, and instructional practices. They are listed not in any hierarchical order. They're just listed 1 to 6. They have all equal value, and that's explained in the document itself if you read the preface to it. So when using the basic components tool, it's recommended that you examine the spread infrastructure with a team. But for those of you who are from small LEAs, if that's not possible, it is also recommended that you at minimum share the results that you find with other leaders in your system in order to be able to get a broader comprehensive view of what's going on. So in the next slide, we're going to talk about or go back to the analogy of the garden. When you focus on improving one component in your system, you still have to watch what's happening across your system to ensure that every component is receiving the attention it needs to flourish. We liken this to a garden because it's obvious, right? Every part of our salsa garden, it's a coincidence that today's Cinco de Mayo and people are probably eating a lot of salsa today. Every member of our salsa garden needs equal access to water, sunshine, fertilizer, in order for it to be healthy, balanced garden, right? To yield hearty vegetables. So when we take a look at our special education systems, the same thing. Our garden, our vegetables are our students and our staff. So we want to make sure that we have everything in balance and that they have supports that they need. So in the first section, there are 3 subcomponents. That is collaboration and communication. Some questions that you will be addressing, and you're gonna, when we get past my section over to Erin, she's gonna take you through the document itself. We asked, does the LEA have a mission, vision, values, and goal statements to support improved outcomes for all students? Okay. Does special education leadership engage in long-term strategy development about curriculum, transitions, and resource allocation. And then lastly, does the LEA have systems and processes that support relevant and timely two-way communication with students, parents, and community members? In the staffing section, there are two subcomponents that focus on hiring and allocation practices, as well as organizational structure. One of the questions addresses, does the LEA use data to hire and allocate education staff in a manner that meets student needs according to each student's IEP? In section 2.2, it asks, does the special education office have a defined organizational structure that supports student learning and staff retention? In the policies and procedures sections, there's two subcomponents that address the focus of IDEA compliant policies and procedures, as well as the extent to which the LEA supports a strong pre-referral process. So section 3.1, does the LEA implement IDEA compliant policies and procedures that provide free and appropriate public education for all students? So many of you have started your student file review, are looking at your policy reviews. Some of you have attended the educational benefit training. All of these pieces work together as you evaluate your systems. And subcomponent 3.2, we look at and examine, does the LEA demonstrate the implementation of a multi-tiered system of support that enables general education teachers to address the specific learning needs of students prior to the special education assessment, right? How do we help the students in the general education classroom? And do we have a process to do that? Once again, let's go back to our garden. So we can investigate the underlying experiences of our students and staff and look closely to examine if the current system is fostering healthy development. So I'm going to take you back for those of you, I used to be a coordinator, I used to be a SPED director, work directly with staff, and I want us to just think, what happens to our new special education teachers who do not receive consistent guidance and support? What I've seen happen is often they wither, right? Their energy levels, sometimes they quit, sometimes as systems, we decide to non-reelect staff. But I just want us to take a step back and let's ask ourselves, did we really do everything in our power to nourish their professional development? What about the students in our system who don't fit our existing programs or service models, whether we're in a large district or a small LEA? Do we accept responsibility if our system fails them, doesn't meet their needs? As we examine our special education infrastructure, let's really consider if our system is fostering healthy development for students and staff. So the next area or component is data systems. There are two subcomponents in this area which focus on the accuracy of data that we collect to monitor student progress towards special education goals. In one subcomponent, the LEA examines whether or not they meet regularly to review central data systems and structures, and that data meets the needs of the state, because obviously we do have to report data to the state. Subcomponent 2, does the LEA collect special education performance and compliance data and effectively monitor student progress towards special education goals, examining educational benefit? The next area, resource management, includes two subcomponents. The first, we examine, does the LEA multidisciplinary leadership team review and evaluate the special education budget and develop finance and staffing plans related to fiscal obligations for providing specialized instruction and supplementary aids and services for students with disabilities? And then secondly, does the LEA monitor its fiscal risk factors and provide guidance to staff on the use of state and federal special education resources? This morning in our session, I talked a little bit about, as LEAs, when we make choices to have administrators or administrative designees set at IEP meetings, right, as the LEA representative, we have to understand that we're entrusting them to make decisions that could have some type of fiscal impact on our system. And so what are we doing to prepare them to be able to have that responsibility? In the next component, instructional practices, there are 3 subcomponents. First, we look at, do students with disabilities have access to general education curriculum and instruction, which includes differentiation, scaffolding, and universal design for learning. Secondly, does the LEA have a system for monitoring that high quality IEPs are being implemented with fidelity? And then lastly, does the LEA consider any harmful effects on the student when determining the list restrictive environment? It's important, obviously, for our IEP teams and our systems as a whole to understand the decisions that we're making in terms of making educational placement and services for students. So we're going to go back to our garden analogy. In our special education infrastructure, we may have procedures in place to collect data, monitor expenditures and instructional practices, but how do we evaluate their effectiveness? If we want a garden that grows healthy vegetables, we must buy good quality fertilizer, right? That has a proven track record of providing nourishment. We must collect data that tells us if our vegetables are growing at the expected rate. And we must examine if the gardening approaches that we're using are yielding the desired results. So as we've discussed, the infrastructure assessment process enables us to examine and monitor the components of our special education system. This process is essential because students' growth requires that we address individualized needs. So now I'm going to turn it over to Erin.
Thank you, Olivia. All right, y'all. Olivia just took us through some quick examples and a quick overview of each of the components in our basic component tool and resource that we're going to use today. And in this part of our presentation, we're going to take you a little bit more in depth and give you some opportunity to practice using it. So this first part we're going to do together, then you're going to have some time to try it with others. So let's start off. I know that Olivia went over each of those sections and perhaps you were following along, but just to give you a couple more minutes to peruse and see what this document is all about, we're going to set a quick timer. Ryan, I'll have you put on the music for a minute or so and just have you go through that basic components document. It's 28 pages. Maybe take a look at the beginning. There's a good vignette for you to read, to connect to, look at the different components before we dive in and talk about how we could use this within our LEA. Think about what you notice, maybe what types of structures or language, questions, what components might be easy for your team to understand, and what do you wonder? Do any questions come up for you about this tool? What questions does it maybe bring up for you that you want to investigate further within your LEA? And just take those notes if you would like in your participant guide. And with that, I'm going to set the timer just for a minute or two to let you look through that document. Go ahead and bring everyone back. Hopefully that gave you a little bit of time to just peruse that document, become a little bit more familiar. You're not trying to look through it while we're talking. Now I'm going to take you to page 7 in your document and talk a little bit about how to use this tool to do an infrastructure assessment within your LEA. So on the next slide, we're going to look at how you can begin this work and specifically around assessing your special education infrastructure. Within this tool, you'll see, especially on that page 7 through 20-ish or so, you'll see a nice grid and outline of each of those 6 components broken down by what the component is, the examples of evidence of that component, the status, meaning what status do you believe your LEA is in with that component, and a section for notes. The way this is designed is you should be considering that overall component. Look at those examples of evidence. If you know that you have that evidence within your LEA, you can check those off. If you show that you have all of those examples of evidence, that would mean that you have that area established. If maybe just one of those areas is checked, that would be more of the partial. And of course, not yet would be not any of those established at all. As you're going through, that's going to be that 3-category assessment to determine the degree to which your subcomponent is present in your system. We are going to ask that you truly are honest. Perhaps you have that evidence within your system, Ask yourself though, is it up to date? Is it relevant? Is it something that folks in my LEA know about or use on a regular basis? And if it isn't, maybe we shouldn't say that does exist, and maybe it just partially exists, right? Maybe it's a resource for site leaders around IDEA that needs to be updated. Maybe it's a resource that exists and is stored somewhere within your universal system, but most folks don't have training on it. So really think through those parts and make those notes for yourself if these components and examples of evidence, where they are in terms of implementation and use within your system as well. A lot of us can say we have these things, but the question is always, how well are we using them to support our special education infrastructure and system? So we are going to, and then in the end, we're going to talk about that summary table and reflection questions and how to use that grid that Ryan alluded to earlier, where we talk about quick wins and major projects in the end by picking 2 action steps we can do. With that, the first thing we're going to do is talk about one example, and that's the first section, the first component, which is communication and collaboration. In this component, as Olivia shared, where it's broken down into 3 different subsections. For our time today, we're just going to talk through 2 of these subsections. As you look at 1.1, the mission, vision, and values and goals, you'll see the examples of evidence in the middle there. One example is that LEAs intentionally communicate their mission, vision, values, and goals. And a key LEA goal is that all offices will have those specific roles and shared responsibility for the success of all students. So I remember there were times when I knew maybe our tagline for our district, but I wasn't really as aware of those vision, values, and goals. Maybe you are. Maybe you have an LEA that's very grounded in those. They're posted around all your schools. They're used on a regular basis. They're drawn back to you. So think about how those are used within your system. And then about this idea of norms, right? Do you have evidence of norms that include student first language? Is that something that's in writing? Is it something that's assumed? Is it something folks have had training on and the importance behind it? So think through not just if that exists, but where it is in terms of implementation. And you would then check, maybe you only have one of those. So it would be a partial. We would check partial, make some notes for yourself. A quick win might be establishing that student first language in a written document and communication about that. That might be something that could quickly get out to folks if you work very closely with your upper leadership within your district. Talking about your mission, vision, and values and making any changes around that, that might be more of a major project, right? If you really feel like that needs to be investigated in more. So you can make those types of notes as you go through this document. You'll see in the next part, which is 1.2, this looks at how our special education is engaged in strategy development. So those examples are, what does that leadership look like in terms of how they are integrated within meetings across your LEA? Are your special education leaders, do they communicate consistent information on policies and practices? And are there communications around expectations that site leadership will include special educators and service providers in all site level leadership meetings related to curriculum? So these are other examples. Again, maybe you have 1, 2, all 3, and you would grade yourself, not yet partial or established, and write some notes. I know that I do want to take a moment to think about this evidence in particular. Some of these might seem like, well, yes, of course, right? Or maybe you're in a small LEA and you don't have your own separate special ed leader or director, but you have teacher leaders that are a big part of going through this process with you. Just making sure that you're thinking about how they're integrated within the larger school system and structure. I can remember when you look at that third bullet as a new special ed teacher, being told at times like, oh, you don't need to be at today's staff meeting. It doesn't pertain to you. And thinking like, okay, well, like that's great. I can go work on IEPs. And some of my colleagues who were, maybe speech pathologists or psychologists liked that time to work on our IEPs and assessments and things like that. But I also remember feeling like I didn't really know all what was going on within our system. And as I became a site leader, making sure that those folks were a part of our staff meetings on a regular basis, not only allowed them to be seen more frequently and to become a bigger part of our school community, it opened a lot more doors for our students being included across the campus. That was an expectation at our school. It also allowed us to tap into their expertise, right? Especially when we were talking about providing scaffolding and differentiation for students across whatever instructional practice we were talking through and learning more about. They were experts in the room, and it was important for them to always be a part of those conversations. Even on days they really wished they could go and do reports, we really found that it was critically important for them to be a part of our overall school culture and instructional focus time and learning together. So those are just some examples of evidence. Hopefully you can say you've met all of those. If not, it's okay. That's what we're here to do. We're here to learn and grow and hear some ideas from one another. All right, so I've talked for the last couple of minutes. I want to give you all some time to look at this document and look at a specific section and collaborate with one another. We're going to take what we have learned or seen in this document and apply it into some small group breakout rooms. The way our breakout rooms are going to work is that each room is going to be assigned an area to discuss. So if you're in room 1, you'll see that you're in collaboration and communication. 2 is going to be staffing, 3 is policy and procedures, and so on. I've actually broken down and moved people out of room 1, collaboration and communication, because we just really talked through it. So I've moved a few folks to a different room, and to keep room sizes sort of decent, we're only going to do a few rooms today. But in this room, I want you to take whatever component you were assigned and use a basic components tool and the participant guide to discuss your assigned area. During that time, you're going to talk through what those examples of evidence are and see if you can determine either a quick win or a major project to support an LEA focused on growing in this component area. And so we know that some of y'all are doing amazing things within your LEA and some of these components. So perhaps you are established in each of these components, but you have some ideas that you could share that worked for you to get it to that established level. So think about those examples as well, because there might be an LEA that would love to learn from you. So you'll determine a quick win in a major project. And then when you're done and we bring you back, we're going to ask you to share an idea in the chat so that others who didn't look at your component could see perhaps what they could do to grow that area of their infrastructure. Any questions before we get going into breakout rooms? These are the breakout room topics. We're not going to go in there for too long. So please, I know this morning we got some feedback that folks really liked getting to talk to other LEAs. So we hope that this is beneficial for y'all as well. What other time do we have to meet with this many folks from across California than during these meetings? So let's learn from one another. So we're going to send you into breakout rooms. I'll keep you posted on time. We're going to do about 8 minutes this afternoon and bring you back. All right. With that, I'm going to send you there. We hope that time was valuable to you. If you had somebody taking notes or you heard any great ideas, we're going to give the next minute or so to type those into the chat, the component along with either a quick win or a major project that was shared. We're going to compile these from the first session in this session. And when we send out our follow-up email with the recording, we'll make sure to include some of these examples in there for y'all. So we appreciate you sharing them so that others can learn from you. Either dropping them in the chat, or if you feel comfortable, you can also, of course, go off mute if you would prefer. Awesome. The importance of collaboration from all data systems. Yes. How are all of your data systems working together, and how are you using the information from all of them to understand what's going on in your system? There's an they talked about an organizational chart with contact information. So anyone in the district knows who to contact and for what areas of need. Yes.
I love that.
Great idea. Anything else come up? For component 3, ensuring accessibility and awareness of appropriate policies and procedures. Yes. So in that one, and you can either type in the chat, Mackenzie, or maybe come off mute. Are you meaning just that folks know where to find them and are aware that they are out there?
We talked a little bit about both of those things, like being able to identify where a certain policy or procedure is. And in my specific setting, we're online, a virtual charter school. So, you know, oftentimes there is a policy and procedure in place, but the ability to navigate and find exactly where that is, so that all staff from admin down to teachers have the ability to view that and are knowledgeable is often can be confusing. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea. I remember having to look through like board policy or even contract language and things like that. And like, sometimes the other thing is if you know there's an expert in your, maybe in your small charter, like people know the chain of command to go to them if there's a really important policy that needs to be understood too. All right, well, keep those coming. If you have any other examples you want to share out, we're going to keep going through and talk for a moment about what comes next, specifically around using this tool to do an infrastructure assessment. And then we're going to go into what comes next in terms of the overall SIM process, specifically around step 1. Your next steps with this infrastructure assessment is going to be to go out, pull a team together if you're able to establish a team. If it's not, maybe a team of staff members, maybe there's some others, individuals within your community or LEA community, parents, folks like that could help you and give some insight and complete this basic component assessment. Remember, as you're going through, that this is something you could definitely get caught up in and spend so much time really examining, and that would be great if you have the time. We also know that y'all are busy, and so this also could be a quick assessment to point you in the direction where then you could use the image on the right, which is the effort and impact matrix, to determine just those quick wins and major projects. And we're going to challenge you to pick a quick win and a major project to focus on. Maybe a quick win that you could try to work on before the end of the school year, and a major project that would likely take you through at least the beginning of next school year, if not further, right? After doing that infrastructure basic component assessment. And so we hope that you'll be able to use this tool within your LEA, and it'll give you some valuable information to grow those systems that support our students with disabilities and students across our system. We also don't want you to forget that this infrastructure assessment, we always want to go back to that, what we talked about at the beginning, right? It is our garden. And so we want to close out with remembering that this process does enable us to examine and monitor each of these components and to spend time providing the necessary attention that each of them might need, but that we can't always just give all of our attention to one component, right? We might need to spend a little extra time looking at something like policies and procedures, but we need to remember to always circle back around to ensure that each of those other components are growing along with us as well and getting what they need in order to continue to support our larger system around students with disabilities. And so we hope this garden analogy also helped connect it, and that as you go forward, you do keep that in mind as you're looking at your infrastructure. All right, we told you at the beginning we were going to give you a resource to help you get organized, and you made it this far. So we're going to put in the chat right now a tool, a planning worksheet that we created that we hope will help you organize, especially this part one or step one, I apologize, of the SIM process, this gather and inquire process. You'll find it, it is fillable. We're going to give you a way to make a copy right now within Google. And then later an email will go out with this document and a PDF as well. But we wanted to give y'all first access for being here today. And so it's going to allow you to really look at and break down what dates you attended sessions, if you've turned in the homework, if you started the next steps for that part, and hopefully organize yourself and making sure that you are doing everything you need to do to come out of this, not only having met each of these components for the SIM process, but we hope also just growing your awareness around disproportionality and making those changes that we need to make in order to support all of our students across our LEAs. So there's a link to that organizer. Next up, we're going to take a moment to also share with you our upcoming meetings and check-ins. We have a makeup session for policies, practices, and procedures review. That is on Tuesday, May 10th. And you can register either within this PowerPoint that you have access to, or we'll drop the link in the chat to our technical assistance workshops. Thank you, Adrian. She is on it. That day there in the afternoon, there's also a question and answer session. So join that if you have specific questions around that process, policies, practices, and procedures. CDE, our CDE partners will be there to help us with that. You also see here, oh, sorry, go back one slide. Upcoming for step 2, we wanted to get these dates out to y'all soon as your calendars are filling up. And this is going to be a very critical component for step 2 is that root cause analysis. So make sure to check out those dates in May and then July. And then hopefully we'll have some more dates in August for those folks that are still on break in July. And then Ed Benefit Part 2. The first part of our Ed Benefit training was just an intro. If you didn't make that, email us, let us know. We'll send you the video link. Part 2 is really going to go into depth on how to do an Ed Benefit within your LEA. So make sure to register for that one as well. Next one now, Ryan. And as always, we encourage you to schedule a coaching session. If you have questions, if you just want to collaborate a bit, maybe you are in a small LEA and you're looking for some outside thoughts, please contact Adrian. Her email is going to get dropped in the chat right now. Schedule a coaching session. We've really enjoyed them, and we've been inviting our FMTA CDE partners, and they've been joining as well. It's been a great time for all of us to get together and see how we can support you all through this process. So schedule a coaching session. We really like this next slide. It really breaks down the event dates, the important dates for y'all. So if you haven't already saved this slide, make sure you take a screenshot or keep it somewhere handy. Remember where it is. It's a reminder, June 30th is when your final pieces for this part 1 are all due. So keep that date in the back of your mind. July through September is when we're really going to be focusing on step 2. That's a difficult time for most folks as you're getting ready to start the school year. That's why we wanted to get those root cause analysis trainings out to you right now. So please don't forget, as you're ending this school year and starting up next, we do still have important pieces that we need to do within this work. And if you are ever curious about the due dates for all of these things, you'll see a link on this slide with the SIM due dates. So please make sure to check out there. You can see all of the due dates for everything for part 1 there. We want to leave you with this quote as well from James Clear, that goals are good for setting, but systems are best for making progress. And so we hope that you take this tool today to really examine your system and see how you can continue to grow it to do great things for kids. Before you leave, we hope that you will take our quick survey. We value your feedback. Please use the link that's going to be put in the chat right now and let us know what you thought, how we can make it better, and how we can make future trainings better as well. Thank you so much. We'd really appreciate your feedback for today. And as always, at the end of our presentation is our appendix with all of our information about our CDE contacts and our ED&D contacts, broken down by the map where you can find your region. Based on your region, you should then be able to determine who your FMTA contact is through CDE. If you ever have questions about that, don't hesitate to reach out to one of us. we'll do our best to connect you to the right person. So you'll see through Region 11 there, and the administrators of each FMTA department, of course, our ED&D team contacts there. And we like to acknowledge the California Department of Education, who we are a grant-funded project with CDE and CCEE here down in Southern San Diego at the South County SELPA, their work on disproportionality, and are very glad to be doing this work with y'all now to broaden our impact. So thank you all for being here today. We're going to hang out for a few more minutes to answer any questions. If you do have questions, on this slide as well has a link to our FAQ page. Please go there. We're updating it regularly as well. And we hope y'all have a great Thursday afternoon. Thanks, y'all.